Hi, welcome back to the What Comes to Mind series. Today is episode 9 and we are going to talk about the lungs. So, some interesting facts about the lungs to start with is first of all how we breathe. I'm not sure whether you know or not know, but we actually breathe through something called negative pressure. So the muscles over here called the diaphragm, down here, down here actually, it contracts and it basically forces the lungs to expand, so they end up being quite big. And what that does, it lowers the pressure inside the lungs compared to the pressure outside, the atmospheric pressure. And because of that change, it actually draws air in, so we can utilize the oxygen that we need. And once we've done that business and we need to get rid of the carbon dioxide that we've produced, the diaphragm relaxes, the lungs kind of close up back up again, and it increases the pressure in the lungs compared to the pressure outside. So we actually end up forcing the air out. So that's actually how we breathe in and breathe out. So I'm still here. I'm just practicing something for breathing in and breathing out. But another point is the surface area of those little air sacs at the end. So we know we've got the right and left lung. We've got these bronchioles, so these kind of branches off, and we got many bronchioles that are going further down. And right at the end, just before the you can say the gas gets into the blood, so the oxygen into the blood and the carbon dioxide back out, those little you can say bubbles or these balls are actually called alveoli, so these air sacs. And they are actually one cell thing to increase the diffusion of the gas into the blood. So being the shorter the distance, the quicker the diffusion can be. But what's actually quite interesting is the surface area of these are so big that if you were to stretch them all out, there'll be about 75 meters cubed in surface area, which I think is pretty incredible for something in the lungs. So something else I wanted to add, which I find quite interesting when I think about the word lungs, is the incredible feat athletes have in using the oxygen that we take in. So as I mentioned earlier, we breathe in and out, so we're utilizing oxygen, get rid of carbon dioxide. And that process can become more effective, more efficient. With the more exercise you do, the better nutrition that you have, and the more cardiovascular function you practice. Now, to give you an idea of that, in sports physiology, there's a term called VO2 max. That's the amount of oxygen you can utilize during intense exercise. So a person of my age, in terms of having a good VO2 max, it'd be within the level of about 42 to 46. So I'm generally quite active, I generally eat quite well, exercise quite often, even during the lockdown. And if you were to compare my level to an Olympic athlete or even a cyclist, so for example Chris Froome, a very accomplished and decorated cyclist, his VO2 max is 86.5, around about 70 kilos. So I'm actually around about 70 kilos as well. So his VO2 max is double mine. And for those of you who may not know, when you do this form of test, you are put to the breaking point of failure. So you are maxing out as much as you can. Like you keep going until you can't do anymore. And he can do double what I can. And I'm not a professional athlete. I wish I was, but I'm not a professional athlete. I would class myself as somebody fairly active. And for him to have the double the VO2 max of me is just like incredible, just ridiculous. I'm just trying to contemplate that myself. His VO2 max is double mine. I'm just gonna go exercise now because I want to try to get it above 50. 86.5. However, let's carry on. So something else that comes to mind when I think about the lungs are actually two particular points. One is oxygen and two is asthma. So when I think about oxygen, I think of when I'm in nature here. So for example, right now, I am near this tree. So as you can see, there's this tree right here, big massive tree. What this tree is expelling out is what I can't live without, which is oxygen, what we all can't live without. So I'm gonna go to the tree, get a bit closer. What we actually can't live without. And what I'm expelling as a waste product is what this tree and many other forms of nature actually utilize. So if you're outside now, I want you to do exactly what I'm about to do, which is, thank you tree. I kind of wanted to do it again as well. This is another tree. I just want to say, thank you tree. There's a big tree. A lot of oxygen is expelling out for me. I might just stay near the tree and just get some more oxygen. What do you think? If you're near a tree, I hope you do this too. But on to the next point, which is asthma. So the second point, as I mentioned, is about asthma. And for those of you who don't know, and if you want to, you can check my LinkedIn profile, which is in the description box below. Is one of my roles is being a research assistant for Restrictive Medicine Institute. And I've been there since August 2019. And within there, we look at research for severe asthma. So all the consultants, the nurses, the practitioners, all the people that I work with over there, all looking at how to combat forms of people who have severe asthma. So what medications, what therapies, what inhalers, what type of exercises. And if you think about the investment and the time, the personnel, I'm talking about researchers, healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, physicians, consultants, people who are looking after the industry itself, all of them are dedicated to trying to help combat disease that is to do with not being able to breathe that well because of some form of inflammation. I just scratched my head to think about the millions and billions of dollars and pounds are spent in that, looking at a disease that's affecting how we breathe. And the reason why I chose asthma as something that I think about when the word lungs comes to mind is how devastating it is, and how I've seen people who have been suffocated or suffocating, not being able to breathe, gasping for air, crying and in pain because of a form of asthma. Now believe me, if you think asthma is just a bit of difficulty breathing and popping an inhaler, there is so much more severity to the disease where people are in intensive care because of asthma. If you think about COVID-19 at the moment, those people who the government, even in your own country, would have advised those who have some sort of respiratory issue are the most high risk. So imagine somebody who has severe asthma. You know, I pray for those who have these conditions to be as safe as possible, because COVID-19 is so severe for people who have respiratory conditions. And to add, in terms of severe asthma, these people are on all sorts of steroids to try and suppress the inflammation. Now, to add, if those who may not know about asthma, asthma is a disorder where there's inflammation in the airways that are causing bronchoconstriction and reducing the airflow, in simple terms. So some form of airway bronchoconstriction, which I'll talk about later on in the video. But what I want to add right here, right now, is the shocking memories I have of people very close to me who have severe asthma. And I have witnessed myself, somebody right in front of me, not being able to breathe or talk or even gasp a word, and in pain, in severe pain and worry and panic. And I have to tell them, don't worry, it's okay, it's gonna be alright. And if you guys have seen that, you know full well how difficult that actually is. And think about many other conditions I'm going to allude to now that have this form of issue. People who are on oxygen cylinders have to go to the shop with the oxygen cylinder because there's something wrong, unfortunately, with their lungs. That's what comes to mind when I think about the lungs. I genuinely want to hear what you think. Because you may have somebody close to you or even yourself that has some sort of issue with the lungs that's not your fault, and it's actually affected your life. And I'd love to hear what you think, or how you've changed your life or improved it because of something like that. Similar when I mentioned about the brain and the heart in previous episodes. Let me know what you think, because when I'm out here thinking about the trees, the nature, on the flip side, somebody might have hay fever, somebody might react to the pollen, unfortunately, and have an asthma attack. You know, and that's so tragic to think of. The pollen and the nature can also be a harm, unfortunately, through no fault of their own, I'm sure. You know, so what genuinely do you think of when the word lungs come to your mind? I really, really, really do want to hear that. You know? But now I'm actually going to talk about the differences in the actual lung disease, which you may or may not know. So in terms of actual lung disease, we have restrictive, obstructive, perfusion and ventilative lung disease. But I want to focus on the first two, which is restrictive lung disease and obstructive lung disease. So you can see over here, we have a list of restrictive diseases. And what restrictive lung disease is whether there's some form of damage to the actual lung tissue. Now, I mentioned early on in the video that the lung tissue expands. So the air sacs expand, the lung tissue expands to help to get air in. And when there's a damage to that, think of an elastic band. So when you pull an elastic band, it pulls and then it recoils. But when there's damage to the actual lung tissue, it becomes like a really old and really difficult elastic band where It may open a little bit, but most likely it can rip, it can break. And that's the same with actual damaged or scarred lung tissue. And you can see over here there's IPF, so idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, is one of the examples. And when there's this scar tissue, the amount of oxygen or amount of air you can take in is restricted, hence the term restrictive lung disease, because the amount of elasticity is reduced, so the amount of lungs opening is reduced, so the amount of air that can come in is also reduced. So a lot of these, you see them having oxygen kind of uptake and taking in. You can see them have like these kind of wires that go into your nose to have oxygen to go in, because they're not able to open their lungs enough to get enough oxygen to go in. And if they exert themselves even a little bit, you may see they're huffing, they're puffing to find it difficult. And that's one of the examples of restrictive lung disease. Now over here is obstructive lung disease. And naturally, this is to do with a lot of the notion of air getting out. So restrictive is generally to do with getting air in, so not being able to open the lungs enough. And obstructive disease is to do with trying to get the air out. So a classic example, as I mentioned earlier, is asthma, where there is some form of inflammation that restricts the airflow, so not all of the air can get out as conveniently and as efficient as it normally does. So you have to pant and breathe to try and get more air to get out as well. So COPD that you see on this side as well is another form which is very similar to asthma, and that's the notion of obstructive lung disease. So you find it difficult to get the air out. You can breathe in, okay, get the air into the lungs and expand, but to force it back out, because the airway is a lot more, can you see my eye? It's a lot more narrow. It's actually more difficult to get the air out. And I've seen, thankfully, with one of my jobs, that the amount of work, study, research, care, treatment, the NHS and the research in general to try and open that up. So using bronchodilators, so things that open up the bronchioles, things to stop the inflammation from occurring, treatment to target a particular molecule that triggers the white blood cell kind of formation and expansion to treat the inflammation. All this to do with trying to expand or prevent that bronchoconstriction, as well as many other things. So I hope that was quite useful in terms of understanding some aspects of lung disease. I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys, about the lungs. Do let me know your comments in the section below. Please subscribe if you can do, so you can enjoy more entertaining videos and informative videos. But in the meantime, I'm going to try and get more oxygen from these trees. I was about to say lungs there, see? This is already in my head, see? And I'll hopefully see you tomorrow for another video. Take care, keep safe, see you tomorrow.